Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today's topic is 3 tips on how to write a memorable theme. Now that's very subjective, depends on the person, depends on their taste and all these other factors. But we're going to craft something and I'm going to give you some tips that will help you get to that point that will improve your writing and hopefully become a memorable theme to you and to your listeners. And let's get started. Number one, when writing a theme, make sure that your theme has some sort of contour and rhythm that's interesting to you and whatever you think that is. You have to create that and experiment sometimes just by adding a rest or by taking the note from here to there, adding a leap, or then by step. That's your way of crafting your own theme. Now, in terms of it's memorable, that's something else. But I mean, one way is to study the scores of all the great classical composers. Think of Beethoven with his bum 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 bum, Fifth Symphony motif, fate knocking on the door. There's also Mozart. He did from everything from Eine kleine Nachtmusik to his 40th symphony and 41st symphony. There's some amazing themes, his operas as well. And then if you move into film scores, John Williams, Jerry Goldsmith, Ennio Morricone, all these composers follow this same form of study of how to take melodic content and make it either interesting by changing the rhythm around or leaping and following the steps that sounds pleasing to the ear for him or her. Take a listen to Shirley Walker. I mean, her theme to Batman, the animated series, is amazing as well. Sounds very dark and it's able to modulate in different areas. There's a great YouTube video, and I'll link it here, of her talking about it, and she's playing on the piano as well. It's fantastic. Take a listen to how she goes through the different iterations of that theme as well. Something to keep in mind is to study the themes of others and then craft your own to see, do your best to follow those steps. Schoenberg has a great book about crafting themes as well. Well, melodies, basically. And you could also try the Alan Belkin book, or he has a great YouTube series online as well to help you with creating ideas for themes, that you can dream up using your imagination. I use, and we'll get into this a little later, a piano sketch to do this to help my sketching. So all those little tips will definitely help to add shape and rhythm, which is also important on how listeners remember your theme. Two is think about your arrangement and your orchestration. How you combine those instruments and how you can create your arrangement with the theme that you created is super important because it will either make your theme sound fantastic and wonderful, or it could detract and make it sound less than what you want it to be. So it's super important to think of the combinations of instruments and which instrument should actually play the theme and which one should be more background. Or the orchestration, what colors do you want to come out more as you're kind of crafting the orchestration for this and the arrangement. So, and which in a way kind of engages the listener, how you arrange everything and how you keep their interest with the orchestration. And number three, does your theme take us on a dramatic journey, or does it have a dramatic arc? Does it have a beginning, middle, and end? Does it get more interesting? Does it start small, swell all the way to the end? The best themes take us on some sort of journey, and it's kind of like an interesting experience. So does your theme do that? Does your orchestration and arrangement help it do that? So keep that in mind as you're crafting your theme, and you're creating your arrangement, and think about the instruments, the combination of instruments, on how that will take the listener and engage the listener from beginning to end. Does the interest dip in the middle, or does it, you know, pique their interest? That's something that people want to hear, right? Think of the best themes that you've heard of. They engage you from beginning to the end, and it's something that we should always work on. This is something that can be actually worked on every day. It's like an exercise. All right, so those are the 3 tips. I'd like to apply them to a recent composition I wrote. So let's go to that now. Okay, now we're back. And this is the theme I wrote. And when I write my themes, for instance, I either write with paper and pencil sometimes, or I just use sometimes when I'm in a hurry and I need to jot the idea down, I just use a sketch piano track I have on my DAW. And it really is useful because, as you can see, the sketch piano pad kind of allows you to explore these ideas without a lot of the orchestration and stuff like that that might get in the way of your compositional thoughts. So I like to kind of start that way and at least get a tune or a theme going on top and then have just add simple chords on the bottom that will help me. So for this theme, I was thinking something like I had actually a film in mind, not a particular film, but something I imagined. This guy was leaving, and it's very dramatic because he's like Latin from Spain, or he could be from the Wawa West, and he's of Hispanic descent, and he's leaving the dramatic scene, and it has that kind of flavor. So that's what I was thinking when I was kind of noodling around with the idea. And why don't we listen to it first and get a taste for this? All right, so you get the idea of the theme. It kind of starts here and it follows this kind of shape. It's a contour that starts here, kind of descends a bit, then rises again, and then it rises a little bit, but then comes back down, but then decides to rise one more time with a leap here. So the leap kind of emphasizes like the climax a bit, then a little bit of a small descent of notes, and then back up again. And this is because I need something to, it's almost like elided where it's going to start it's transitional. It's 8 bars, obviously, but this is kind of like an elision that's going to connect it to the next repetition of the theme. So this is how I start. I start with a piano sketch and I go, then think, all right, well, what instrument would kind of give this Spanish flavor in the beginning? And I thought to myself, well, let's see. Let's try putting this in, for instance, the English horn. So that was my first thought when I did this. And as you can see here, the piece starts with the English horn as the theme. And it's the first iteration of this because there in reality there's 7 iterations of this theme that occur. And you know, we have so far the first one here. The first one is going to have English horn and then strings, tremolo strings, so kind of quiet, and harp. That's about it. So why don't we just listen to that and see how it evolves. And I'm just going to highlight these instruments here. So we can mute that one because we don't need that one anymore. The harp, English horn, I have a few pizzicato basses and the tremolo strings. So let's listen to that on the top here. the next iteration, then we start with piccolo. Piccolo takes over with oboe 1, clarinet 1. They all are playing the tune again. So it kind of builds to that. Harp is still doing its thing, playing arpeggios. But now we add a counter line here in the cello. That little build against the theme that you heard earlier. So if I highlight that with, I don't know, I'll just pick clarinet because it's doing the same thing as oboe 1 and the piccolo, just to make sure it comes out. So as you can see, it kind of, the tune is up here, and then the counter line is over here. And it kind of, as this goes up, this goes down, you know, good use of counterpoint. When something goes up, you want to, your ear tends to hear this, but then it hears something else. And it's like, oh, that's interesting. So, and I was just fooling around with just to keep things interesting for myself. Let's listen to that. All right. So as you can see here in the MIDI data, you can hear the descent here while this goes up, and uh it's almost like a descant in a way, but not on top, it's on the bottom. So, you know, it's a counter line basically. Another way of writing counterpoint. All right, so that's the second time. Let's listen to the third time here. Third time, I start adding a little more. Now we have two flutes playing the tune, and the clarinets and the bassoons are added for a little more weight. The harp is still doing kind of this arpeggiated thing along with what do you call it here? The cello, and there's also pizzicato on the bottom. So kind of it's not march-like, but it's getting to that point, you know. And just to keep it consistent, because we're just adding orchestration and the arrangement's getting thicker, the chord progression is still the same. That hasn't changed. That's something that we don't want to start changing all of a sudden, because we want to keep it, you know, kind of consistent as we build the theme, and to make sure that we can keep interest by just changing the orchestration. So let's listen to that. And we'll start from 19 here. Let's see here. Here is 19, and this is the third time. All right, so that builds there. Now we're going to introduce a kind of sextuplet thing, accompaniment on the bottom, and all the strings are doing it. If you can see here, no, it's like triplets, but later it will become sextuplets. So this is kind of like the beginning of that, uh, along with a violin solo that you're going to hear played. And actually here we're also going to add horns. The horns are, let's put that together with the bassoons. You know, you can do, I think I did one horn. Two horns would probably be better. If I were to orchestrate for live players, but this is on the DAW, so it's okay for now. But I would add another horn just to balance it out. Well, we'll see. It could be too heavy, but see, those are decisions you have to make when you start orchestrating. So why don't we hear, getting into the fourth time, a little bit from the bar before. And as you can see here, this is the counter line that the horn is playing. Because it's just one violin and, kind of almost like a duet with the violin and the horn. And then you have the rhythmic part in the strings and in the low woodwinds, which are the bassoons in this case. So it starts like that. And then obviously I started adding the timpani here to give it a little bit more weight. So, we're adding more percussion. Brass was added obviously with the horn. And now we're going to continue adding a little more here. Going to have the percussive chords here, kind of the same chords that we had earlier in the piano part, but now played in the brass to give it a little bit more power. And add a little bit of staccato here in the trumpets. And the horns and the cellos are going to be playing the tune here. While everyone else, this is a counter line here, and everyone else is playing the rhythmic kind of sextuplet thing I was telling you about earlier. So this is what it will sound like. Let me play it from here. All right, so that's horns and cellos, which is always a great combination. As you can see here, the violins and the violas are having a good time moving around a lot. With first violins also playing this counterline way up top, kind of like the one we heard earlier in the cellos, but now it's transplanted basically up in the stratosphere for the first violins to have fun with, and it creates this interesting kind of like exotic flavor because of the rubs and stuff like that you hear, some of the suspensions. All right, now we hear it. Now all the strings are playing that rhythmic figure, sextuplet, and we're adding more percussion here. Obviously, the timpani is going hard. Same chord progression right here in the brass. Now we have the trumpets, and I put them in a lower register on purpose because I wanted to get that kind of like nasally, gravelly sound down there before we do it the last time, which is going to be an octave higher. But, the horns, the woodwinds, and all the brass instruments are joining in. This is almost everybody. Let's see. We have almost everybody here. I also added castanets for a little bit of energy. So why don't we hear that in context here? And we're going to start it here. A little bit before. All right, and before we go to the final iteration, I just want to say, like, for instance, the movement in the winds and strings, that's super important because it creates this kind of rush and, I don't know, sparkly kind of sound in the orchestra. And they're great. Woodwinds are great for that. They have like, you can have them play staccatissimo, which is fantastic. And strings can do that easily too. They can play that spiccato. It's great. All right. So as you notice, it's getting bigger. And then this little run, I decided to have the strings kind of play the sextuplet going through. Let me see if I can just isolate that so you can see here. I had to do with Marcato strings and this little run. This is totally doable for strings, and it's fun. And then they do a little rising. I think I wrote a almost like a quintuplet going up here just to get up to the high D. And this is just for special effect. In recording sessions, since I play violin, I've done this before in recording sessions, and it doesn't have to be perfectly in time. It's just for an effect, when you have like 20 violins doing that, it sounds really impressive. So this is the final iteration, and we have violins, high violins playing really high. We had more brass and percussion here. There's going to be timpanis going strong as well. And yeah, everyone is just blasting away. And I forgot to mention that there's also a choir on the bottom. So if I go down here, you can see I added a little choir just to, give it a little bit more of a different color, which is really cool. So I'm gonna show you real fast from here. And we can start it a little bit before the 7th version. So this is that run leading up to it. And then the choir comes in here playing, singing Oz, basically. So let's listen to that all the way to the end. All right, and then it ends obviously with timpani banging away, harp doing his arpeggio, and then just a sustained string pad. But yeah, I did want it to build like that, obviously. So I had to plan it out in my head first, and then write the tune, and then orchestrate it in a way for it to build to that point, you know. So it was very interesting. So that's basically how the tune works. So there you go. That's how I wrote my theme. You can do something similar. Again, I start with a piano sketch. You're perfectly fine doing that. You can also sing into a phone. I do that all the time when I walk my dogs to get an idea, and then translate that then to, kind of the tune with chords, and then orchestrate and create the arrangement you want. And, it's just having fun with what you can create, and have a story, like have a storyline in your head. That usually helps. That's why reading a lot of books, watching movies, drawing, anything that stimulates your imagination to come up with these things is really super helpful. Let me know in the comments how you go about writing your themes. If you have a method, share it with all of us. And if this video was helpful for you, let me know in the comments as well. Make sure to like, subscribe, and ding the little bell so you get more notifications of upcoming videos that I'm going to make and other tutorials. So thank you again for being with me and joining me on this tutorial for composing themes, and I will hopefully see you in the next one. Thanks so much.